Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn...
Hello everyone, and welcome to part 4 of Why the Rings of Power Season 2 sucks. This will be the final part of the series, and we're almost finished. But there is still a great deal of bullshit to unpack. If you haven't seen any of the prior 3 parts and would like to watch those before watching this one, then you can find the link to those videos in the description. However, you don't have to watch any of the first 3 parts in order to understand part 4, so if you'd like to just watch this one first and then cycle back to the first 3 afterwards, then that's totally fine as well. Today, we are going to be dissecting the final 2 subplots remaining in Rings of Power Season 2. That being the Rhun subplot as well as the Numenor subplot. We'll start with Rhun and then transition into Numenor afterwards. So, to kick off the Rhun subplot, we start off with Nori and not Gandalf making their way through the desert waste. They seemingly don't know which way they are going, and Nori is quick to bring up the fact that they are lost. Well, of course you guys are lost. You have been following stars, which only appear at night, which will make it harder to stay on the path towards your destination during the day, because you cannot see the stars during the day. Now, granted, stars obviously don't move a significant amount in the sky from night to night, so if you have a general idea of the direction you are supposed to go, then you should be fine. But if you find yourself going through a landscape where you are constantly being turned around in different directions, then it's going to be harder to keep straight which direction you're actually supposed to be headed in. Shortly after, Nori says that they are out of food. Now, this shouldn't be a problem considering, as we saw back in Season 1, that not Gandalf was able to create a bunch of food out of nothing for the Harfoots. But for some reason, he's hesitant to do so here, so Nori has to beg him in order for not Gandalf to finally agree to make food. He kinda fucks up though, explodes the nearest tree, but luckily a bunch of bugs come crawling out, so I guess they can eat those. In fact, Nori is ecstatic at the fact that they get to eat bugs. Yeah, this girl definitely looks like a bug eater. Later that night, Nori and Gandalf are eating their bugs by the fire. Gandalf expresses that he is upset with himself because he wasn't able to control his power, and Nori responds to that by saying, "Alright, well, then just learn to control your powers." Yeah, thanks Nori. How helpful that is. Nori, in response to Gandalf opening up, expresses that she misses her home. Now, this line is a little confusing to me and falls flat because Harfoots don't have a home. They are constantly moving around. Now, when she says home, it's possible you could interpret that as meaning her family and her community of Harfoots around her, but that is never specified and seemingly isn't what she is talking about specifically. So I'm going to assume that she's talking about home as if it's a place. And because she is talking about a place, this seems very out of character for not only herself, but also just a Harfoot in general. So Gandalf and Nori suspect that skeleton masked dude is following them. So the next day, they conduct a trap to capture him. Despite this being one of the most obvious traps in history, only a total idiot would fall for this. Checks out. Wait, Poppy, how the fuck are you here? Did you just spawn in out of nowhere? I have so many questions that I know I will never get the answer to. So since Poppy is now somehow here, the show has inadvertently established that Poppy is an incredible tracker. In fact, probably one of the best trackers in the world. Gandalf and Nori left Poppy behind last season, so if she was going to leave the pack and seek them out, Gandalf and Nori would have had a significant head start and have been well out of sight. So Poppy would have obviously had to have tracked them somehow. Then there's the 2 other questions. Did she just finally catch up to them and finally track them down? Or was she just waiting around watching them until the writers could write in a contrived dramatic entrance for her? Who knows? I guess we're just going to have to go with it. So since the 3 of them don't have any maps and aren't able to effectively navigate the desert, Poppy conveniently pulls out a piece of paper with some writing on it, saying that as long as they sing their walking song, they'll be able to find the way to the place they want to go. This is really goofy in my opinion, but regardless, they skip and sing their way through the desert and make it to the lands of Rhun. Later on, Skeleton Masked Man returns to the Dark Wizard. Inside Dark Wizard's sandcastle, he and his minions perform some magic and resurrect this chick from the dead. If you don't remember who this chick, who is called the Dweller, even is, then I can't blame you because last season she was so entirely useless. Dark Wizard asks the Dweller what she knows. She repeats things that we already know. Dark Wizard gets mad and threatens to replace her. Skeleton Man walks in and says that he's found the wizard and the Harfoots. Dark Wizard wants to capture not Gandalf soon before he can grow too powerful and become a threat to himself. So Skeleton Man says that he's up for the task, and when Dark Wizard is rightfully skeptical of his abilities to get the job done, he responds by saying that he'll capture the Harfoots first so not Gandalf is forced to surrender. Easier said than done. How he plans to accomplish this, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Cut back to the desert. The three idiots continue to march on while spewing meaningless dialogue. The three are sitting when Gandalf hears the steps of horses approaching from the distance. Poppy and Nori are so quick to hide themselves that before not Gandalf can even turn around, they are already fully hidden, and not Gandalf is stranded alone. Now this is in character for the Harfoots, that they would be able to hide themselves effectively since that has been established earlier in the series. But at the same time, it's a pretty dick move by them, cause they're pretty much just screwing over not Gandalf. And now he's just gotta hope that he can find a hiding spot, but hey, every man for themselves, I guess. The three are able to successfully hide themselves, and after the skeleton people leave, not Gandalf deduces the fact that they are still being followed. And because of this, they are going to have to change their course. Now, not Gandalf is right. Yes, they are being tracked. But what not Gandalf fails to realize is how does he think they were tracked in the first place? And how would changing your path change anything besides slowing them down? Surely you have to realize that they were able to track you, presumably in large part because of the trail you've left behind with your feet. And it doesn't matter if you change paths. That's still going to leave a trackable trail. And not Gandalf doesn't mention anything about covering up their trail or masking their trail, so I am led to believe that he is entirely naive enough to believe that this is a good plan. And it inevitably is not a good plan, because next time we see them, they are struggling their way through the desert. Not Gandalf collapses of dehydration, but conveniently, there is just a well that happens to be over the next hill, because of course there is. After not Gandalf gets resuscitated, the skeleton people are able to track them down thanks to the very convenient bell that went off when the well was used. As the skeleton people charge, their first action is to shoot arrows at them. Keep in mind that the Dark Wizard specifically stated that he wanted them alive, so them doing this is beyond stupidity. Gandalf picks up a nearby stick, uses it as a staff, and just summons a sand tornado. He still has very little control over his powers, however, so he is entirely unable to control it, which sends everybody besides himself flying hundreds of feet into the air after being sucked into the vortex, effectively killing them all. But nope, none of them die, as we'll see later. You have to remember, guys, Rings of Power is a very stupid show. Anybody with 2 brain cells would understand that getting flinged hundreds of feet into the air at great speed is going to kill somebody when they land. But sadly, the writers of the show don't have 2 brain cells, so everybody survives without a scratch. Skip forward to episode 4. Not Gandalf goes off to search for Nori and Poppy, even though they should be dead due to the laws of physics. He stumbles upon a house in the middle of the desert and asks this guy whether he has seen them. He responds with some confusing dialogue, but it pretty much translates to, "I don't care." Gandalf then loses his map because of a gust of wind. It somehow very conveniently travels all the way to this specific tree, and this specific tree decides to eat him. Why does the tree eat him? Who knows? Meanwhile, Nori and Poppy wake up from their slumber, although, as you all know, they should be dead. The skeleton people have already been able to find them, causing the two to run away frantically. They run into this bumbling idiot named Miramac, who, of course, is the means to lead them to a secret village where they will be safe. So basically, the writers had to have them land very conveniently ever so close to a new character who can lead them to safety from the skeleton people that have been chasing them the entire season so far. And the writers do this because they somehow couldn't find a logical way to get from point A to point B. So they just said fuck it and took a shortcut. Miramac takes them to the super hidden village, which we'll find out later in the series isn't super well hidden. We then get our first introduction to Gundabale, who is immediately characterized as being an asshole.
Are you talking back sass to me?
When Gundabale threatens to kick them out, and has them plead as to why they should stay, Nori says that they have walked across the earth in order to help their wizard friend find his destiny. Gundabale then jumps to the conclusion that they must be working for the Dark Wizard since she said the word wizard. And her jumping to this conclusion I think makes no sense. For one, she talks about the Dark Wizard as if he is the only wizard in the world, and for all she may know, there may just happen to be multiple wizards across the world. So why is she just assuming that there can only be one wizard? 2. Nori says that they have traveled across the earth with this wizard, implying that they have come from great distances. And as we've seen up to this point, the Dark Wizard seems to just sit on his throne, not doing anything. And he's not too far away since his sandcastle is also located in Rhun. So, judging based on the actual words that Nori says, Gundabale should be able to deduce that this is a different wizard that she is talking about. And 3. Assuming all you presumably know about this Dark Wizard, do you really think that these two gremlins of all people are in cahoots with the Dark Wizard? Come on. The fact that she jumps to this conclusion is one of the worst contrivances in the show. Back in Dark Wizard's sandcastle, Skeleton Man has returned to inform Dark Wizard of their current failings. Dark Wizard tells Skeleton Man from now on to only focus on capturing the Harfoots, and that he will take care of the Eastar himself. So after half the season being already over, the Dark Wizard has finally decided that he is going to get up and do something. Cut back to not Gandalf. Tom Bombadil comes to fish not Gandalf out of the tree. The fact that he knew to look here would imply that this has happened before, so it was kind of a dick move by Tom to not warn not Gandalf to watch out for the eating tree, since his map was flying in that direction. Back at Tom Bombadil's house, him and not Gandalf have a lot of back and forth dialogue. A lot of it could have been cut since it provides no additional value, but regardless, the key takeaways are, Tom Bombadil is the oldest being in Middle-earth, he trained the Dark Wizard to use magic, and that it's Gandalf's destiny to face off against the Dark Wizard and Sauron. Well, we know one of those is a complete lie, because Gandalf never did directly face off against Sauron, at least in his full form. And the face-off against the Dark Wizard later down the line, I know is going to be goofy as hell. Back in the Store Village, Nori, Poppy, and Miramac have been tied up. Nori reveals to Gundabale that her tribe leader was Sedek, and since Gundabale knows who that is, she decides to show Nori one of their cave paintings, illustrating that one of the Stores a long time ago ventured off to a place that he saw in his dreams called the Suzat, which is just the Shire, by the way. Gundabale thinks that she is the one to gather up all the remaining Stores because the Shire has been found, but no, in fact, she isn't. Apparently, for some reason, even though the Harfoots could never find the Shire, they decided to just keep wandering, even though you'd think the logical thing to do would be to return home after your failed exploration. Meanwhile, the skeleton people have showed up at the front door in search of the Harfoots. Remember how this place was supposed to be a super secret village? Yeah, well, they just walk right in like it's nothing. The first thing the main skeleton man does is slap the fuck out of Gundabale.
Are you talking back sass to me?
Although why he does this, I have no idea, because he immediately helps her up afterward. He asks where the Harfoots are, because obviously he assumes that the Stores are hiding them. But when Gundabale responds that she has no idea what they are talking about, they just straight up leave. Instead of having a look around for themselves, they just apparently are gonna take Gundabale's word for it. Skip forward to episode 6, and we're back with not Gandalf and Tom Bombadil. Assuming based on the dialogue spoken here, not Gandalf has been staying with Tom for some time now, since Tom says, every trial you have faced so far, you have failed. However, it doesn't make sense for a significant amount of time to have passed, because the show presents this plot branch as well as the other story branch back with Nori and Poppy to be happening synchronously. But as we'll see in the next scene, Nori and Poppy's storyline seems to be going through time much slower. So it's very confusing how exactly these plot lines are matching up at this point. The only other thing of note here from this short scene is a poorly placed joke before it cuts away to Nori and Poppy. So I'll finish off this section with not Gandalf first and then circle back to the two gremlins after. So not Gandalf and Tom Bombadil venture to find not Gandalf a staff. Once the two of them have reached the spot, and not Gandalf sees the unending amount of trees, he fears that it will take too long to find his staff as well as save Nori, since he saw in a vision earlier that she was going to be in some kind of trouble in the near future. And so he asked Tom to temporarily leave to save his friend and then return afterwards. However, Tom Bombadil says that he has to stay if he is to choose the path of his destiny, although why is entirely unclear. Not Gandalf saving Nori and his destiny to face off against evil do not conflict with each other. So the fact that Tom Bombadil is making him choose here merely serves as a contrived sense of drama. Circling back to the Harfoots, Nori challenges Gundabale by saying that they should just leave, in order to be free of the oppression of the skeleton people. And in response, Gundabale has to explain the value of staying put in one spot and having an actual home. Now I find it a little confusing that Nori doesn't understand the value of a home by this point, because as we saw earlier in the season, Nori confessed to not Gandalf that she really wanted a home. So the fact that Gundabale has to spell this out for her, even though logically she should already know this, doesn't make any sense. sense. We then cut to these two idiots trying to conduct small talk. Poppy and Miramac, I guess, are confirmed to be a thing now, and sadly I had to watch them awkwardly try to convey romantic interest in each other. Not only is this short scene here insufferable to watch, but the more time goes by, I'm really starting to wonder why Miramac is even in this TV show. He has served next to no purpose in progressing the story, and has only thus far served as a means for Nori and Poppy getting to safety earlier in the season. His inclusion is absolutely unnecessary beyond that. And every time he is on screen and I have to listen to him speak, I continue to lose more and more brain cells. Moments later, Poppy tells Nori that she thinks that they should stay to fight for not Gandalf, because they now both believe that he is somehow important. I'm fine with her coming to this realization, because obviously if this guy is just summoning sand tornadoes out of thin air, then yeah, he's probably pretty important. What makes no sense, however, is how exactly you think you are going to be able to defeat the skeleton people without the aid of not Gandalf. And as far as they are aware, there is no indication that he is coming. But hey, if you want to try your best, be my guest, because logically it should end up with them dying, and that would really help out the story a lot if they were just gone. Skip forward, nothing happens in episode 7, so we're on to episode 8. Not Gandalf walks into the Stewar's village, and nobody is there. How exactly he found this place, considering that it's supposed to be hidden, and why he thinks that Nori and Poppy are here, who knows? I'm not saying that it isn't possible that he could have made this discovery, or why he knows that the two gremlins are here, but we don't see how he came to these discoveries. This is a major plot gap that the show just doesn't care to depict in the slightest, because the writers aren't concerned in the slightest about convincingly getting from point A to point B. So then the Dark Wizard shows up to meet not Gandalf, and the same shit applies here. How the Dark Wizard knew how to get here, and how he knew that not Gandalf would be here, I have no idea. If you want to chalk this all up to magic shit, then just be my guest. However, the show never explicitly states or shows us that magic was the reason that they knew all of this information. So Dark Wizard tries to convince not Gandalf to come with him so that he can learn everything about himself and gain everything that there is to gain, in an effort to defeat Sauron. And he's admittedly doing a better job at this point at convincing not Gandalf to join his side, certainly better than Tom Bombadil has done, who has really only been depicted as a prick and doesn't give a shit about the lives of not Gandalf's friends. But Dark Wizard's plans fall off the rails when his skeleton minions show up and fuck everything up for him. So after Skeleton Man threatens Dark Wizard to hold up his end of the bargain, Dark Wizard forces him into a wall, killing him. So I guess that's just it for Skeleton Man. We've had an entire season with him, and still know next to nothing about him or his motivations other than he wants to be healed. He has merely served as a device to move the plot forward, and is nothing more beyond that. It's also worth noting here that Dark Wizard has saved Nori and Poppy's life, giving not Gandalf even more reason to trust him now and join his side. But instead of continuing his ploy to get not Gandalf on his side, and likely exploit him for his powers, he just decides to come out and effectively say that he is evil. Are you kidding me? How dumb can this show get? My god. Not Gandalf refuses naturally, so Dark Wizard puts him in a force freeze, and as he walks off, decides to level the village with boulders. As he's leaving, he says something along the lines of, "Hopefully this will give you a taste of the suffering that Sauron will inflict." And he says it in a manner as if he's trying to still convince not Gandalf to join his side, as if this is somehow going to convince him to join you, killing an entire village worth of innocent civilians. Not a good plan, buddy. Cut to the next day, and the village has been destroyed. The stewards decide that it is unsalvageable, but surely if you just move all the rocks out of the way, you can rebuild this pretty quickly. But nah, time to move on, I guess. Nori then just decides out of thin air that it's time for her and not Gandalf to split up and follow their separate paths. Thank fucking God. I hope we never have to see this smelly hobbit again. But why do I think they'll find a way to work her back in the story for no apparent reason? You know what? I'm actually confident that they'll do that. So till next time, Nori Brandyfoot. Nori leaves not Gandalf behind, and as he turns and walks in the opposite direction, he trips on a stick and hey, look! It's his staff! Jesus Christ. I literally could not think of a less interesting way for not Gandalf to find his staff. But obviously, this is what they decided to go with. Just so unimaginative. Not Gandalf returns to Tom Bombadil, claiming that he realizes it was all a test. This is an instance where the show greatly overexplains what should have been obvious. but the writers think you are idiots, so they have to spell it out for you. Tom Bombadil says to Not Gandalf that a wizard doesn't choose his name, but literally in the very next shot, Not Gandalf chooses a name for himself. He remembers that all the stewards were calling him Grand Elf for some reason. So he combines the two words, switches out a couple letters, and Not Gandalf has now graduated to becoming Gandalf. But to call this version of Gandalf, Gandalf, I think would be an insult to Ian McKellen. So this version of Gandalf, for future seasons, I will refer to as Gandoof. Gandoof and Tom Bomb sit by the fire and sing a song about Tom Bomb. Wow, that's pretty arrogant of him. Dark Wizard looks at the sky, contemplates why he didn't just kill Gandoof when he had the chance, cause now he's going to have to deal with him in later seasons. Oh wait, I know why, because the writers are setting themselves up to add contrived drama. And that's it. That's it for Rhun. In summary, the Rhun subplot is an absolute insufferable display to see unfold. Not only do I think that this is the worst subplot in the show, it is also the most disconnected from the larger narrative. Disconnected to the point where you question why this story is even included in the show. I know why, of course, cause you remember the person from the thing that you really like, right? If you wanted to make a Gandalf storyline, then just make a Gandalf show, cause having to constantly cut here is negatively affecting the pacing of the overarching narrative of all the other storylines. The only connection that can be made is Dark Wizard and Gandalf have mentioned Sauron a couple of times. That's it. They also, for some reason, felt the need to throw in the origin story of the hobbits in the show about Sauron creating the Rings of Power. Why they felt the need to do this, and why they thought that general audiences would give a shit about the halflings discovering the Shire, I don't know. These versions of the hobbits, these prehistoric hobbits, the Harfoots, are so disconnected and so different from the hobbits that we see in the Peter Jackson trilogies that they can't even really rely on nostalgia for the other thing to keep the people interested. The Rhun subplot was a chore to get through, and thank God we are over now. So let's move on to the Numenor subplot, shall we? And sadly, it doesn't get much better. We kick off the Numenor subplot with Elendil letting Beric the horse go, after he is unable to control him, due to Beric being so close to Isildur and presumably being upset that Isildur has been lost to the forest. It's kind of fucked up on Elendil's part that he just let Beric wander off into the forest, knowing that it just got obliterated by the volcano and is now unsafe to travel through, but I'm willing to let it slide considering that it's made clear that Elendil is no longer able to help him, since Isildur and Beric's hearts and spirits have been combined after riding into battle, as per the explanation back in Season 1. Jump back to Numenor, and the funeral for the now-dead king is underway. Eärien approaches Elendil to express her grievances about the new Queen Regent, saying that he shouldn't feel bad about his son's presumed death because she was the cause of his death, not him. However, this isn't entirely true, because ultimately, Elendil was the one that allowed his son to come along to fight a stupid war against the orcs, fueled by Galadriel's idiocy. So really, I think I probably would blame Elendil more than I would blame Miriel. Moments later, a random woman approaches Miriel and slaps the fuck out of her in the face. The reason she does this is because she is deeply upset that her son died in the battle in the Southlands, and ultimately blames Miriel for her death. Now this woman should be thrown off a cliff for assaulting the queen in the way that she does. There's also the other question of how this woman was able to just walk right up to the queen so easily, especially when you take into account that she's blind. The guards just stand there and do nothing. But instead of being arrested for this grave insult, Miriel decides to give her a big hug. Jesus Christ. I can understand that Miriel might feel bad for this woman who lost her son in the battle, but the fact that she wasn't angry at all, that she was just assaulted, and the fact that this woman seemingly isn't punished for her actions, I found downright stupid and unbelievable. Cut to later that night, Pharazôn walks in on Miriel to discuss the topic of dresses for her coronation. In his hands are two different colored dresses, crimson for Numenor's future, and white for Numenor's past. Why these two colors represent these two things, who knows? The show doesn't give an answer to this, and I guess we're just going to have to accept it as fact because Pharazôn said so. We then have a scene of attempted political drama. Pharazôn, Kemen, Eärien, and Lord Belzegar sit around a table and discuss how they all believe that Miriel is unfit to rule. Lord Belzegar is only in this scene as a means of delivering exposition, letting the audience know that apparently Pharazôn has a pretty good claim to the throne over Miriel. To my knowledge, this is the first time that this has ever been mentioned in the show. Not only is this very convenient, and only has been mentioned now for the first time ever because the writers writers need the plot to happen, but it's also a missed opportunity. The writers could have been planting the seeds of this development for Pharazôn's character all the way back in Season 1. It would have been interesting to see back in Season 1 Pharazôn know deep down that he has a better claim to the throne, but ultimately goes along with the secession of Miriel because he is too frightened of what the consequences of rising up against her may be. But then, after Miriel's debacle over in the Southlands, combined with the fact that she is now blind, ultimately gives Pharazôn the confidence to pursue his political coup. But instead, the writers decide to cram it all into this singular episode, because now it is relevant to the plot. Valandil approaches the table and asks why they of all people would be drinking in places surrounded by lower class people. He insults Kemen and threatens him to not speak ill of the queen again. Kemen is a bitch and backs down, and Valandil walks off. Although some of the dialogue and delivery here is pretty cringe, it's mostly functional from a plot and character perspective, so I don't have too many complaints here. Skip forward to the end of episode 3, and it's time for Miriel's coronation. As she makes her way to the throne and reaches out for the scepter thingy, a random woman screams out that she is a queen of lies. Now, why all these common people were allowed inside of the throne room for the coronation of a royal figure, I have no clue. And the fact that she isn't escorted out after this, and instead, Miriel once again does her "I feel your pain" speech, is just stupid. When Miriel asks the crowd whether anybody else has anything to say, Aarion speaks out and works her way towards saying that the reason that they went to war in Middle-earth was because Miriel took counsel from the Palantir. However, there is no way that she can be definitive about that because she never actually saw Miriel use the Palantir, and Miriel never stated to anybody that the reason that they went to war was because of the Palantir. So Aarion is completely pulling the shit out of her ass in order to make this point, even though she has no clue on its credibility. After Pharazôn states that no true ruler of Numenor would use an elvish artifact, Miriel responds that they need it, and a fight breaks out. But the fight is soon broken up by the arrival of an eagle. Now, earlier in the episode, Pharazôn stated that an eagle showing up to a coronation ceremony is very rare, indicating that whether that were to happen or not, it holds a great deal of value. And the fact that an eagle does show up to Miriel's coronation, you think would indicate to the people that she is in fact the right person to rule Numenor. But instead, Pharazôn walks up to the eagle, and because he does this, people for some retarded reason just believe that the eagle favors Pharazôn, and he's the ruler now. Wait. What? What the hell is going on? Isn't this Miriel's coronation ceremony? The eagle showed up for her, not for Pharazôn. Why would you think that it showed up for Pharazôn? Because this guy just started chanting his name? That's not how it works. But these people are idiots, and the writers need the plot to happen, so I guess Pharazôn is the leader now. Wow. In just one episode, the plotline is completely broken already. I can't take this political coup of Miriel seriously anymore because the setup has just been so ridiculously bad. Now skip forward to episode 5. Pharazôn is now the ruler of Numenor. He looks off upon the horizon of the city with Kemen at his side, and the two have a little chat. During this conversation, Pharazôn reveals his deeply rooted jealousy for the elves, which hints at the idea that he might want to challenge them in the future. Now this exposition dump really comes out of nowhere, largely due to the fact that Pharazôn has gotten so little characterization across the 2 seasons so far. Now if you have a deep knowledge of the source material, then that isn't a surprise. Because in the source material, it is well characterized that Pharazôn has a hatred for the elves and even goes to war with them. But if you just look at the show itself, the show has given next to no hints that these are his beliefs about the elven race. So it really comes out of nowhere and wasn't built up to at all. The scene ends by Pharazôn tasking Kemen with a really important task, which isn't revealed to the audience, because the writers are addicted to these stupid and worthless cliffhangers. Why Pharazôn trusts Kemen of all people to carry out what is seemingly going to be such an important task, I don't know. Kemen so far hasn't really been characterized to be a capable person, so why Pharazôn isn't trusting Kemen to carry out this task doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. We then cut to Miriel speaking with Elendil. Elendil informs Miriel that many people are still loyal to her, including the Sea Guard, which to my understanding is the entirety, or at least vast majority of their military. So if she really wanted to make a push to win the crown back, it seems like she'd be able to do so. However, she decides not to when Elendil describes that his vision was different from hers when he touched the Palantir. Hers was the destruction of the city by the sea, and his was not. This really highlights the fact that Miriel has put full trust into the will of the Palantir, even though, as seen by Elendil's vision, that the trajectory of the future can be changed based on the actions taken in the present. Why Miriel has such an unwavering faith in an elvish artifact that she'd let it entirely dictate her actions, I don't really know. It's not necessarily out of character, since she has been shown throughout the show to value the visions of the Palantir greatly, but the show does not do a good job of explaining why that is the case. Later, we see the Seaguard that are loyal to Miriel all being forced to turn in their stuff, because they are being stripped of rank. When Elendil asks who is the cause of all this, Aarion is quick to reply in a very conceited way that it was her. In fact, Aarion's behavior throughout this scene is kind of strange. She talks as if her father is going to be very approving of what she has done, and that he should just accept that Pharazôn is the king now, which shows that she fundamentally misunderstands who her father is. Also, considering that she is the one carrying out this order, it must be assumed that Aarion is now a devout follower of Pharazôn to the point where she is going to carry out his agenda and has now become a person of power under him. And this all happened off-screen. Cut to the end of the episode, we see the faithful praying for the recently deceased at the oldest shrine in Numenor. However, they are quickly interrupted because here comes Darth Kemen. Presumably, this is the task that Pharazôn bestowed upon Kemen earlier in the episode, as a means of weakening his political opponents. I think now is a good time to highlight that Kemen has been fundamentally changed as a character at this point. He was once a little dweeb who just did everything that Aarion told him to, and is now a spineless little shit. And prior to this episode, that is not how he was characterized in the slightest. So seeing that this is now how the writers have decided his character is going to be is incredibly jarring. A massive brawl ensues after Valandil prevents Kemen from hitting Elendil, who is being held down by the guards. Valandil and Kemen fight one-on-one, which results in Valandil winning. Valandil has a sword up to Kemen's throat, and is about to kill him, but stops when Elendil orders him to. Valandil, for some reason, decides to drop the sword right next to Kemen, although he very clearly could have dropped it into the pool right next to him. Why he would be so stupid as to drop it here, I have no idea. But it results in him getting killed, cause he turns his back to Kemen, slowly starts to walk away. Kemen picks up the sword and stabs him in the stomach. Instead of killing him face to face like a man, Kemen waits until the fight is over and his back is turned, once again emphasizing that Kemen is now a spineless little shit. Skip forward to episode 6, and Elendil has been brought forth before Pharazôn to face judgment for the crimes he committed. Crimes, quote-unquote, because Kemen said so. He is told that because of his service to the kingdom, he can go free as long as he renounces his crimes, which he does. But he also has to swear loyalty to Pharazôn, which he does not. Elendil refuses to swear his loyalty to Pharazôn, saying that the true ruler of Numenor is in fact Miriel, and that he is the actual traitor. However, I don't think Pharazôn actually is a traitor, because according to our current understanding of how this monarchy works, he hasn't broken any rules. According to the show's own rules that it's established, if the eagle shows up for you, then you're the ruler. Yes, I know that is fucking stupid, and it's questionable at best whether or not the eagle actually showed up for Pharazôn on his behalf, but regardless, that is what happened. And because of it, Pharazôn is the king now. So Elendil saying this isn't actually true, even though the show presents it to be as such. Skip forward, Elendil waits in his cell as the sea worm is summoned. Aarion comes to see Elendil and begs one last time for him to swear his allegiance to Pharazôn. However, this is just completely redundant considering how loyal Elendil has been shown to be towards Miriel. The show presents Aarion as if her father is the most important thing to her in her life, when she utters the line, "I can't lose you too." However, her actions have directly contradicted this. So I'm left wondering how much she actually cares about her father that she'd help Pharazôn usurp Miriel, the queen that her father is loyal to. Yes, I understand that Aarion doesn't like Miriel because she blames her for Isildur's presumed death. But Elendil has told her time and time again that Miriel is not the one to blame for his death. So I don't understand why she can't get that information through her skull. Aarion has played an instrumental part in getting Elendil into the position that he is in now. So I have a hard time believing that she actually cares about Elendil and more notably, his judgment. When Miriel enters the cell and Aarion exits, Muriel commands Elendil that he bow to Pharazôn, but Elendil refuses, saying that he knows that she is the true heir and therefore won't bow to Pharazôn. This is kinda confusing because Elendil is apparently willing to die for his loyalty to Muriel, but also won't accept a direct order from Muriel. This is a direct contradiction in logic, which the writers clearly did not realize that they were writing themselves into. Now, on to the trial by Abyss. Elendil has accepted his fate to be judged by the Valar, but why Pharazôn agreed to let him face the judgment of the trial by Abyss, I don't really know. Pharazôn is treating this like it's a form of execution, and he is for sure going to die. However, that isn't certain considering that this is one of their ancient trial methods. And surely there must have been instances of people surviving this trial. So the fact that Pharazôn would agree to subject Elendil to something when it isn't a guarantee whether he's going to die or not, I don't find believable considering that Pharazôn absolutely wants this man dead, since he didn't swear loyalty to him and is a political threat to him. Before Elendil is thrown in the pool, Muriel shows up and demands that she be judged in Elendil's stead, since the crime was committed in her name. And according to the law, she is allowed to do that, 'cause of course she can. We've gone too long without a plot convenience. Elendil resists Muriel's demands somewhat. However, he probably could have resisted harder and begged harder to Pharazôn to take him instead. But he ultimately decides to go along with it, and Muriel walks into the pool to be judged by the giant sea worm. After having an underwater staring contest, the worm throws her out of the pool, deeming her innocent. After this, Elendil helps her up and starts chanting that she is the Queen of the Sea. And I guess people are going along with it, because they start chanting that she's the Queen of the Sea. And I guess Pharazôn is just not the king anymore. I'm confused. Does her being deemed innocent by the giant sea worm just mean that she is innocent of any crimes? Or does it mean that she is innocent as well as the Valar favor her to be the ruler of Numenor? The show shows us that it's the latter, however, why this is the case is never made clear. So I guess Muriel is the queen again. Yay! Skip forward to episode 8. Pharazôn has gathered the leaders of the faithful to convince them that the reason Muriel was able to survive the trial by Abyss was due to her being allied with Sauron, and for some reason everybody just accepts this as fact. Although Pharazôn has no possible way of proving that it was Sauron's power which kept Muriel alive. Lord Belzegar then states that from this moment on, that all citizens who are part of the faithful are now considered traitors. What the fuck? Nobody is going to question this. Nobody is going to challenge the validity of this strange document that Faramir just happened to pull out of his ass? How does Lord Belzegar have the authority to order this? Isn't Muriel the queen again? Wasn't that the whole point of the last scene? Who fucking knows? The writers just want their dumbass plot to happen, so they will pull out any contrivance necessary in order to do so. The soldiers then begin rounding up all the citizens who are part of the faithful. How they are able to tell who is who considering they have to go through the entire city, and it's not like the faithful wear armbands around them to identify themselves. Who knows? Just go with it. After Elendil is able to evade being captured, he immediately goes to rescue Muriel. This is most definitely in character for him, but I question how Muriel has not been already arrested by the time that Elendil would have been able to reach her. Elendil tries to get Muriel to escape with him, but she declines, because of course she does. She claims that her place is here, and that Elendil should escape by himself. Muriel then just casually gives Elendil Narsil, which as we all know will later become the most important sword in all of Middle-earth's history. But instead of making this moment something that was naturally built up to, it instead merely serves as a key jangling scene to remind us of the thing from the thing. 'Cause wow, isn't that cool? The last thing that we see from Numenor is during Poppy's voiceover monologue. We see that Elendil has managed to escape, and Muriel has been arrested. Rather conveniently after she could have her scene with Elendil. And that's it. That's it for Season 2 in Numenor. In summary, the Numenor subplot is an absolute failed attempt at writing a political drama in every single way. The characters are a bunch of idiots and constantly act on things that make no sense. The show also constantly breaks its own rules, while simultaneously not being clear enough with other rules that the characters just abide by. What was supposed to be the next interesting chapter in the story of what will eventually become the downfall of Numenor sadly devolves itself into a joke that I can't take seriously whatsoever. And with all that said, the Numenor subplot for Season 2 is done. And that's it. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. We have finally made it through all the storylines of Season 2. So since now we've made it all the way through, what are my overall thoughts of Season 2 as a whole? Well, to be quick and concise about it, Season 2 is just straight up terrible, and might even be worse than Season 1. And I hate that I have to say that. I obviously don't want to hate this show. I would much prefer if this could be a positive exploration of how good it is. I want the stories of Middle-earth to be told well. I've never been the one that has read Tolkien's original work, but I am someone that greatly respects and grew a deep appreciation and love for it in the Peter Jackson adaptations. The stories of Middle-earth are some of the most inspiring and well-written stories in all of fantasy. They have impacted my life greatly, and will continue to inspire me for the rest of my life. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, for all its flaws, have been instrumental in shaping my love for filmmaking and storytelling. So when I see something like Rings of Power, something that is such an insult and betrayal to an IP that I love and has impacted me greatly, I'm obviously going to take great offense to it. And I certainly do. It is downright disgusting how terrible Rings of Power is, and how clearly the showrunners don't respect or care about the original source material that they are taking from. I am not confident that they are going to learn from their mistakes. Season 3 is not going to be any better in the slightest, because their ego is just straight up too big. And we have to keep calling out this bullshit for what it is. Because if we don't, then there's no chance in hell that it is ever going to get better. And with that, that's going to do it for Rings of Power Season 2. If you've stuck around to the end of this video and you've made it through the entire series, then I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to you. These videos have taken a long time to script out and make, so thank you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts. If you have any of your own thoughts about Rings of Power, whether it's good, bad, something you feel like you need to get off your chest, then please, feel free to take to the comments below, because I'll be interested to hear your guys' thoughts. But with all that said, that's going to do it for today. I will see you guys in the next one.